Sometimes nothing is more horrifying than being in isolation. Welcome to the Film Strap Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I hope you're having a good day today. My mission is to tell you about cool indie movies that you need to see. This movie, Isolation, today is a horror anthology film that's maybe one step away from reality. It is a series of shorts by some incredibly talented directors, all about the world in the midst of a global pandemic and how people deal with it. It's an incredible collection of stories. Before I introduce the filmmakers and talk to them about this film, I have an announcement. I cut my hair, and this actually ties in a little bit with what we're going to talk about today, because I just sort of let my hair, like as many did. Many, during all of the lockdownness and whatnot, people have maybe let their health go a little bit. I know I put on a few pounds. I got to work on that. I let my hair kind of grow, and I got it cut, and that, who cares? But I'm just, in case you decided you wanted to comment on it, did Gore change his hair? Yes, I did. I'm back to my pre-pandemic cool guy hair, and I'm going to see if I can pull that off. Also want to, before I bring the filmmakers on and talk to you about this movie, I never ask you to do this, but can you share episodes of the Film Threat Podcast where I talk to filmmakers, especially if you really like the movie? I really am passionate about supporting indie filmmakers whose movies need exposure, and sharing, liking, subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already, and clicking that notification button. I see other YouTubers say that, and I never say that. So I am asking you, help Film Threat and myself with our mission to support independent filmmakers, because you wouldn't know about these movies without me, right? I mean, I guess there are other places you could go, but that is in particular our focus. I want to introduce at least one of the filmmakers from this project, Isolation. The producer, Nathan Crooker, is here. Larry Fessenden is going to be joining us shortly. Nathan, thanks for joining me on the Film Threat Podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I watched the show, love the show. I'm happy to be here. Did I mention how much I like your hair?
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. Well, you have no idea. My hair was incredibly, like, I just sort of let it go. And now it's just like, no, I got to get, I'm done. Let's get the hair back to 2019 style.
Nice.
But this movie, we were talking before I started recording, because I love horror anthologies. There's one, the Mortuary Collection. Mm-hmm. There's another series of horror anthologies that's come out that each takes place in one state in the United States. And that's going to be a collection. It's like 3 movies, 50 short films. I love that.
Right?
What's that?
50 States of Fear?
That's it, 50 States of Fear. And then there's the ABCs of Horror. That's another one that goes through the alphabet. Your film, Isolation, is a collection of short films, all about 10 minutes each covering an aspect of the pandemic and taking it kind of maybe one slightly step further. But I almost feel like you've made a documentary at this point. It's how did you put this whole collection together? How did you find the filmmakers and come up with the stories? Because they had to be different. Each of them is very different. But it's also, what's cool is they all connect in a small way with an amazing payoff at the end. And here, Larry just showed up. Here we go. Larry, I think you got to put on the earphones. We're getting some feedback.
Uh-oh, is he stuck?
Getting some feedback, Larry. Try to put on some AirPods or headphones, and I'll unmute your audio. But Nathan, if you could start and just tell me, like, how did you find this collection of filmmakers?
Sure. Yeah, so, originally I was supposed to do a feature, and it didn't happen, obviously, because of the pandemic. And I was talking to a friend, and he's like, think bigger because I was going to do a short on my own. I was like, you know what? let me think a little bit bigger. And what I ended up doing was, I bet I could bring a really talented group of filmmakers together and do a bunch of shorts. I mean, they're a little bit simpler to write. The idea, we can kind of hone it in. And what I ended up doing was, I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I set out to find these filmmakers, and I called agents from, the top agents, and they took my call and they put me in touch with these amazing directors in the horror genre. And also reached out to people on Facebook and Instagram. I talked to Julian, who just has the Deep House. I spoke to a lot of people that I would probably never speak to, had it not been the pandemic. It was really cool to reach out to them. But at the end of the day, they had to shoot on 4K cameras. They had to shoot in the, lockdown location that we're in, and they had to use who was in the lockdown with them. Because remember, this was at the height of it. This was in May. This was back when nobody was doing anything and going out. The streets were empty. So once I was able to find them, and it took me a good 2 months. I mean, over the course of that 2 months, I was starting to line everyone up. But again, they had a trust in me to make this film. So I got very lucky with whom I was able to work with. I mean, Larry, Bobby Rowe, we got a lot of big names in the genre, but I also wanted to introduce some newer names that are going to be coming up, like Alex Austin, Keir Seward, and Alexandra Neary, like these younger filmmakers that have just done shorts, but are really, really incredible. So, that's kind of how it started, just sort of really whittling it down to who actually could do this, and then trying to find, the stories that would really match, what the world that I created, that I wanted to create, because I didn't want it to be exactly like what was happening right now. Nobody wants to watch that,
But it's not, like I say, it's like this far from, to the reality, right? I mean, It's fiction, but one of the stories with the children, I mean, that could happen, right? Like that was horrifying. They're two children that are kind of, their mother's passed away. The father is gone out for help. We don't know where he is. I don't want to ruin anything, but and it's just two little kids, and they're by themselves in a house with like this. It kicks off with like this message from their dad, that's just horrific. I mean, that one really hit me. I mean, they all were powerful in their own way. Larry's back. Let's see if Larry hey, Larry, can you hear us?
Oh yeah.
You sound perfect now. Now your short kicks off. It's the first one, and it is, it's terrifying. I mean, it's like, and I'm thinking like, also I'm watching like some of the shots. I'm going like, oh, that was a oneer. Like, there's no way that he did multiple takes of, tossing cement blocks into a lake, like
in a snowstorm.
Oh my God. So tell me about like, how you got in touch with Nathan, and like how your segment came together.
Nathan and I had been talking actually about another project of his. And so I guess I was on his mind. And then he came up with this idea, and he just called me and said, would you want to do it? And I couldn't think of anything more fun, because my son is interested in filmmaking. So he was able to DP. My wife's an art director. And we have a lot of equipment lying around the house. So of course I said, sure, let's do it. And I wrote it fairly quickly. And then it was just fun. My little family, it's really just the three of us. I made a very specific schedule. We got up at 9 a.m. every day for 3 days, and had to make our days. And it was really great. Everybody enjoyed having a purpose. As you know, this was 4 months into lockdown, and everybody was going nuts, and we were having a blast.
Well, it really kicks it off in such a real way. I mean, your short is just like, oh, that could have happened, right? Like that. Yeah. I mean, just and just even the title of this horror anthology, Isolation. I mean, we've all felt that, right? We've all, especially at the beginning or during parts when we've had multiple lockdowns, and sort of yo-yo policy when it comes to what the rules are and aren't. That's a whole other conversation, but what the movie does so well is kind of takes all of those things that are in your head, those paranoid thoughts about what could be, and just manifests it into reality. And I also love, I have to say that each of them are so vastly different, yet have the running thread, and there's no weak links. Because I'll say this, almost every horror anthology I've ever seen, it's like, oh, that one's okay. Or like, oh, this is the standout. Like, all of them had this like build and more of a connective tissue than I realized that pays off in the end. I don't want to get give away any spoilers, but and I love that you did a thing I've never seen where you started each segment. I'm sorry, I'm dominating the conversation.
No.
Interview. You each of the shorts starts out with a location, but we don't learn the titles of of each segment until the end of the movie. And I thought that was so I've never seen that done. Like,
well, for that thing, it's not like you. I think if you see the name of the short, you feel like you're watching a short. You're not in that world. You know what I mean? That we're all trying to create. Because, I mean, the beautiful thing about Larry is not only is it like just a great film, he also sets it up in such a way where he's like, you know, it's my story is one among many, right? So like we're seeing this, and of course New York was the epicenter for a lot of what was happening. So starting with his film and sort of that like amazing monologue that he has throughout, like, you know, reminiscent of Poe or whatever. I mean, you're sort of setting up he's allowing me to set that world up even better than the the little title card I have at the beginning of the film. You know what I mean?
And just to your point, like I think one thing about mine that's fun is I really address directly all the different rituals that were assigned to us by, you know, the CDC or the government or, you know, the national conversation, like wash your hands, you know, for 7 minutes, you quarantine for 10 days. I mean, there's all these basically random numbers. And so that's the other thing, the whole idea of rules, which you have in any horror movie. You know, the vampire can only go out from here to here. Garlic does this. It's how COVID felt especially to a horror filmmaker. Like, what are these rules? Are they really apply? You know, and on it went. You know, so.
But rules in genre films, I think work because it gives the audience some understanding. Of course, you know, twists on those rules are always good as well. Exactly. There's also the connective tissue of this virus, you know, photography you did. I don't know how, like, it's obviously a digital effect, but it was very effective. But I think that actually saving the titles of each segment to the end in that kind of montage, this is not ruining anything. It's just montage you see, and then you see the titles. It's like, I actually think the titles would have ruined some of the segments. I mean, you're not even gonna know what this means, but Meat Hands was one of the weirdest, like, that one kind of blew my mind oh, that's like, I'm thinking like, what the hell is he doing? Is he making sausage? Like that one was just so, and then I don't know. I just thought that they were all very powerful in their own way and weren't too far from, I mean, I'll say this, if things had been worse, your movie would be a documentary, right? Like, you can see some of these things, you know, happening or going this way. I'm curious how people have, because this is what horror does so well. And Larry, you know this, you must know this very well. It's like, horror is such a great way for us to therapeutically kind of work things out, right? Like, you see, you know, you see when a certain thing happens that hits the zeitgeist, then there's kind of a wave of horror films that you know, indirectly address it. This one addresses it both directly and indirectly. I'm curious what the reaction has been, reviews or just audiences. How have people responded to this?
Well, I'm curious too, Larry. You know, you had the luxury of sort of showing your film in and of itself. You know, you want to speak about that and sort of the reaction?
Yeah. Oh shit! I just realized I never answered that guy. I showed the movie just in a Brooklyn screening as a little precursor to House of the Devil, one of the Glass Eye movies, and it was fun. People were very struck by it, and they came up after us and they said it was effective. And then that guy said, "Can we tour the movie?" And I didn't really think to answer because, you know, it's part of the anthology. It was just a favor from Nathan to show it singularly. But I mean, in a way, I'm a little disappointed. I think there should be more reviews, more response. I think it's a tough picture. I think it's a little, the old cliche, a little too soon for some people to be sitting down to a COVID. I mean, there are COVID movies like Host, you know, that are clearly dealing with the fact that you can't go out and make a whole movie. Though that was exciting at the time. But ones that really address this confusion and fear and isolation of COVID. I don't know, and people aren't entirely ready. Maybe just starting to be.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to piggyback onto that, because, you know, as far as what we were doing with the title sequences and not giving away the names of the movies and really trying to keep you involved, like really feel like it's an anthology that's bringing you around the world, right? You've got, you know, Larry's film ends and those veins come out and they're traveling around this map. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, where am I going to next? And then you're like, oh, boom, San Diego. What's going to happen in San Diego? And then your mind has to think like, where am I? You know, you're on this journey constantly. Like, so you're always leaning in. But, you know, I think the reviews, you know, lucky we got to screen the film at Fright Fest. We got to screen the film at Scream Fest. So thank you very much, you know, and also IFI Horrorthon screened it before we came out on VOD on November 2nd. But the response has been really, really positive. I think it would, you know, like Larry was saying, we kind of feel like more people would have like seen the film because it has it is in the zeitgeist. And, you know, some of the, I wouldn't say negative reviews, but, you know, we're in a world right now where the opinion is like so big, you know, and I mean, I guess that is what a review
Tell
is.
me about it.
You know, I mean, I don't want to get into that, but, you know, there's some stuff that I read, I found it just be very funny. And, you know, Larry's made so many great movies and I'm sure has his own opinions on things, but, you know, it's like, you know, one of them was, oh, this would have been better if it came out during the pandemic. So, you know, I read that and I'm just like, well, I'm really sorry it wasn't on your timeline, you know, but do you want to talk about the movie? And there's just stuff where they're not talking about the films, you know what I mean? And they're not talking about what these directors were able to do and these stories that are so engaging. It's like, we made a film, talk about the film. You know,
welcome to filmmaking, Nathan. That's what this, it's just bananas now. The presumption, the presumption of critics and audience members. It's really heartbreaking.
Well, don't get me started on the critical community. I think I'll just straight up, they're fucking lazy is what they are. And they're used to being spoon-fed Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, studio factory filmmaking garbage. And because they're so used to eating that fast food film, you know, the fast food version of movies that asks nothing of you, but sit there and absorb and don't think for a minute. And then they're used to a certain level of whatever it is. Fuck that. Film threat's always been about like, like smaller indie movies that ask something more and are challenging. And I think that you freaking knocked it out of the park and hit the nail on the head. I mean, some of those sequences are just so powerful, and just the fact that they all connect in a small way. And then I don't want to talk about the ending because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I mean, look, this movie's on video on demand and you can get it, see it however you see it. I use this app actually. I have nothing to do with this app, but I use this app called Just Watch.
Yeah, I have that. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's great. So I just put in any movie and it tells me where I can see it. I can see it for free, or is it on Amazon Prime? Is it on Netflix? Or can I buy it? And if so, it even does like price. It shows the different pricing. So I use Just Watch. So to you, the viewer, find out where to see Isolation at your own. And then it addresses almost every aspect of what we've been dealing with, and in some ways heartbreaking, and in some ways kind of also comedic, and also really just just sad. I mean, just like straight up like heartbreaking, terrifying, and not too far from reality. I think that maybe that's what's hitting people, is this movie's just slightly like a really good Twilight Zone episode, right? Like it's just slightly removed from reality, just a bit. It's just this one element thrown in.
Yeah, we elevate it a little bit, I think. And I spoke to all the filmmakers a lot, and it was, let's try to leave this idea of the virus and the pandemic in the background. And yes, Larry starts like that, but then it just becomes this like crazy, like what universe are we living in? You know what I mean, with him. And Larry sort of, like I said, he set it up. So that sort of, as you were talking about, as the next story in 5G, we hear on the TV about how people are fleeing to their upstate homes. So there is a lot of that connective tissue, again, to sort of make you lean in. But what I find to be interesting is like all the filmmakers really just, I think, we're probably addressing fears or concerns or things that weren't that they were questioning and reading, you know. And I think by bringing that to the forefront, you know, I think that it not only, you know, they were able to create something great from that in the middle of when nobody was doing anything. That's the difference. I mean, people are like, oh, you made that film. It's like, yeah, look at how creative and look how great, you know, the cinematography is in these films, and the acting and the stories. I mean, people are forgetting when we did it, and that's not the sell. The sell should be the story, right? This, no matter when it was made, you know, it's just icing on the cake. But, you know, I think they're really forgetting just, you know, some of the filmmakers addressing sort of how they were feeling. And I'm like Larry and Denny, you know, I'm not sure. I mean, Larry, we never talked about it, but, you know, I'd assume that there was some stuff going through your mind about what might happen to your family or whatever. Maybe that's why you had done. I don't want to speak for you, but I know from a few of the other filmmakers, especially like Meat Hands, it was this idea of loneliness and being alone and not being able to have that human connection, which is why the meat, as you say, sausage comes up. But, you know, I think it was a way to work through it. And I felt like it's also super relatable. And maybe that's what scares some people.
Also, I was trying to just by chance, when I had the assignment, I had already had my pal who was staying in the city shooting footage of the empty streets, just because I knew that would be so remarkable. And when I've been in the city, it was really striking. So I said, Chris, go out and shoot that for me. And by the way, why don't you head up and look at the ambulances and get a, you know, I just thought it'd be great footage to have, you know, for some kind of a comedy. And then this project came up, and part of the theme of my piece is just the idea of, like, if you escape, you feel you're leaving your hometown behind. The city is struggling and collapsing. And then in my story, the individual guy is also sort of losing his capacity. And it's so that became my theme, you know, both your loyalty to your hometown and also your obligation to escape with your family, and then you slip up. I mean, remember there was a period when you thought you could get COVID from the gas station, you know what I mean? Or, you know, well, from all these things, when the month you were washing your groceries and all of these crazy, you know, because it was such an unknown. So this grew out of that period. It was really the bleak, unknowable period.
Well, it's funny because I'd assumed the beginning of your film, Larry, was digital. Like, meaning, like, how did you get all that, you know, just like vast emptiness, right, in the city? And
that's
I'm looking at people like, that's so easy to do digitally, and I didn't realize it was real.
Oh no, dude! Every one of those is real, and of course, I'm, you know, carefully waiting for a little pedestrian to leave the frame, but that's what's cool. Is mine is also just a historical record. Every one of them. I mean, you see Broadway literally empty. It was startling. Yeah. The city was amazing. And then the other thing, I'm only talking about mine because I know it well. But the other thing that is poignant is when New York at 7 o'clock started banging their pots and pans, and that becomes the catharsis connected to my character's little storyline as well, and so on and so on. So I was speaking of the bigger story. And then, as you say, Nathan, I remember he said, we want you to be first. And I think it's because he recognized that mine set up the idea of other stories, how everyone has an individual experience during these weird times.
Also, there's so much as dark as that can become, that, you know, Larry's film, it's like there is this hope at the end. And I feel like, you know, I didn't want the whole movie to be this super bleak, you know, depressing, dark, horrific, you know, film. I think, you know, obviously we love horror, so like, let's bring it. But I do want this to have like some sort of hope. And I think like by the end of the film, I think that's what, you know, I don't want to give it away either what we did, but, you know, they're there. And like, I think, you know, most of the films, you know, they do leave on a solemn note, but I mean, there's something in there to take away from every single one of them, you know, and that's beautiful.
I will say also, it's my favorite type of horror, which is psychological. I mean, not to say that there's not for gore hounds out there. There are parts where there's a lot of gore. Yes. Yeah. Having said that, the focus is mostly psychological horror, which I think is the most effective, because it's the kind that haunts you after you're done watching the movie. And I was haunted. In particular, also, I think the music where it came in, like, was just really well done for all the segments. So bravo to you two. Is there going to be a follow-up to Isolation 2022 or something? No?
We did it, man.
Okay, good.
You did it.
Well, but I will say, just because I love, I like genre movies. I like horror, and in particular, horror anthologies are one of my just favorites because, you can always find like gems in every single one, and this one is like across the board, just fantastic work. Nathan and Larry, thanks for joining me on the Film Trap podcast. This was great.
Thanks for
Always a pleasure, man. Real pleasure.
Always
Good to
love
be
talking
here.
to you, Larry. Thanks again.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, brother.